My parents cancelled my graduation party for sister's feelings, so I left, and months later they watched as my success on the social media. I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, loved deeply enough, and stayed patient long enough, my parents would finally look at me the way they looked at my sister, with pride that warmed the room instead of politeness that cooled it. I believed effort could earn affection. I believed achievements could balance favoritism. I believed family eventually became. For I was wrong. Growing up, there was always a difference between us. My sister didn't have to try to be seen. She walked into a room and somehow the air shaped itself around her needs. Her moods, her victories, and even her failures were treated like national emergencies, while mine were quiet footnotes added after dinner. If there was time, if she forgot homework, the teacher was unfair. If I forgot homework, I was irresponsible. If she cried, she was sensitive. If I cried, I was dramatic. I learned early to shrink myself to make life easier for everyone else. And I told myself this was maturity, this was kindness, this was love. By the time senior year arrived, I had built my entire identity around making them proud. Grades, volunteer work, late nights, studying, scholarships, applications, everything I did. I pictured bringing it home like an offering. Maybe this time they would see me. Maybe this time they would celebrate. And when I finally received the acceptance letter to my dream university, with a scholarship attached, my hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the paper. I thought, this is it. This is the moment. Everything changes. Mom cried. Dad hugged me. My sister smiled, but it never reached her eyes for a few days. I lived inside. A miracle. My parents told relatives, they told neighbors, they told people at church. They said, my child worked so hard, we are so proud, we should throw a graduation party. Something big, something beautiful, something worthy of this achievement. I let myself believe. It helped plan it. I picked colors, food, music. I allowed myself to imagine standing in the backyard surrounded by people who finally saw me. I imagined my parents raising a toast. I imagined feeling chosen every night before sleeping. I replayed it in my head like a movie trailer for the life I had been waiting for. Then 3 weeks before the party, my sister had a bad day. She didn't get into the college she wanted. She locked herself in her room. She cried loudly enough for the walls to become part of the performance, and just like that, the air in the house shifted back to its natural orbit around Harry. Remember Mom knocking on my door that evening, her face already arranged into sympathy that was not meant for me. She sat on my bed and spoke carefully, like someone placing glass on a high shelf. Your sister is having a very hard time right now, she said. We need to think about her feelings. I nodded because I had been trained to nod. Mom continued, saying that the party, it might make things worse for her. It might feel like we are celebrating you while she is hurting. It might seem insensitive. It might damage her confidence. Each word landed like a quiet eraser, rubbing away something I had just started to hold. I asked, what are you saying? She sighed, the way parents sigh when they want credit for a decision already made. We are thinking of canceling the party. I waited for the punchline. I waited for the reassurance that of course we would find another way. Of course we would still celebrate you, but there was nothing else, just the sound of my future folding itself smaller. Dad came in later, repeating the same sentences about timing and compassion and family unity, as if my entire life had not already been an exercise in sacrificing joy for harmony. They said, you understand, right? They said you are strong. They said you are the mature one. I smiled because that is what mature children do when their hearts are breaking. They make it easier for everyone else. So the party disappeared. Relatives were informed. Gently, deposits quietly returned. Decorations never ordered, and the house acted like it had done something noble. Meanwhile, my sister began recovering almost immediately, laughing with friends, going out, posting pictures while my achievement became a ghost we were not allowed to mention too loudly. Something inside me started to wake up. Not anger, not yet, just awareness. I began noticing how natural it felt for them to give her my moment, how automatic it was. How nobody asked what it would cost me. One night I overheard Mom telling someone on the phone that I had taken the cancellation very well, that I was so understanding, always so easy compared to my sister. Easy. I went back to my room and stared at the acceptance letter again, and for the first time it did not feel like victory, it felt like escape. I started wondering what would happen if I stopped being easy, if I stopped shrinking, if I let them experience the inconvenience of my disappointment. The thought scared me, but it also felt like oxygen. By the end of that week the house had returned to normal, except I had not. They moved around, assuming the story was finished, assuming I had accepted my role again. They had no idea they had just written the first page of my leaving, and I had finally started reading it. After the party disappeared, life in the house moved forward as if something generous had been done, as if we had all agreed to a noble sacrifice, and I played my role so well that even I almost believed it. During breakfast I asked about my sister's plans for the day. I listened when Mom worried about her mood. I nodded when Dad talked about keeping peace in the family, but inside something new had taken root, something quiet and watchful. I started seeing patterns I had ignored for years. Moments that once felt normal now looked rehearsed, like a play we had all memorized without admitting it. My sister sighed and the entire house leaned toward her. She laughed and relief filled the rooms. She complained and solutions appeared instantly. When I spoke, people listened politely, the way strangers listen while waiting for their turn. I realized I had been surviving on crumbs and calling it love. That night I lay awake thinking about the word easy, the way Mom had said it with pride, the way it made me valuable, not because I had needs but because I did not present them easy. Children do not interrupt easy. Children do not demand easy. Children accept cancellation. I wondered what would happen when I stopped being easy. Graduation came. Quietly, no banners, no music, no relatives filling the yard. My parents clapped when my name was called. They took pictures. They hugged me and they meant it. I know they meant it, but intention and impact are different languages, and I was tired of translating for them. When we came home, my sister said she was proud of me, and I believed she was in her own way, but there was still something between us, an invisible scale where my joy had weight only if it did not tip hers. That evening they ordered takeout as a small celebration. Mom said we would do something bigger later when things settled down, but later is a country families used to bury inconvenient promises. I smiled, I thanked them. I went to my room, I opened my laptop and began looking at housing near my university, really looking, not the casual daydreaming I used to do, but planning, budgeting, calculating how fast I could build a life that belonged to me. For the first time, my future did not include waiting for permission to be happy. The weeks after graduation felt like living in a museum of my old self. Everywhere I turned, I saw the version of me who would have accepted this quietly, who would have protected everyone from the sharp edges of their choices, but that person was fading. I began working extra hours at my part-time job, saving every dollar. I stopped discussing my plans at dinner. I stopped volunteering information about deadlines and orientations. If they asked, I answered kindly but briefly. I could feel them noticing the difference, but they did not know how to name it. They probably thought I was busy. They probably thought time would smooth it out. Meanwhile, my sister began talking about taking a gap year, finding herself, maybe applying somewhere else next fall. My parents rallied around the idea with a familiar energy of rescue missions. They researched programs, they offered support, they promised her everything would work out. I watched from the doorway of the kitchen, feeling like a visitor in my own home. One night, Dad asked if I was excited about leaving for school, and I said yes. What I did not say was that leaving no longer felt bittersweet. It felt necessary. I began giving away things I did not need, packing slowly in secret, building order out of heartbreak. Each folded shirt felt like proof that I was allowed to exist somewhere else. Mom noticed boxes in my closet and said, "You are so organized, always so responsible." Easy word followed me like a shadow. The truth was, I was not organizing. I was detaching thread by thread from a place that loved me conditionally, even if they never meant to. About a month before move-in day, my parents suggested a small family dinner, just us before I left, something intimate, something calm, and I agreed because I still loved them. I never stopped loving them. That was the problem. During dinner, they talked about visiting campus and calling every week and how proud they were of the person I had become, and I listened, wondering if they understood that I had become this person, partly because I had learned not to expect too much from them. I wanted to ask why my celebration had been negotiable. I wanted to ask why her sadness always outranked my happiness, but I looked at their hopeful faces and swallowed the questions like stones. After dessert, Mom hugged me and said, "You know, we always try to do what is best for everyone." I nodded, but in my mind, I finished the sentence, "When it costs me." That night, lying in bed surrounded by half-packed boxes, I felt the distance between us widen, not with shouting, not with drama. The call came on a Tuesday. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just my phone buzzing while I stood in the cereal aisle comparing to brands. I didn't even like Dad's name on the screen. I smiled when I answered. "Hey," I said. His voice told me immediately this wasn't a social call. "Hey kid," he replied, trying for normal and landing somewhere near exhausted. "You got a minute?" "Yeah." "What's going on?" There was a pause, paper shifting, Mom murmuring somewhere in the background. Then he said it. "The furnace went." Of all the disasters in the world, it was so ordinary it almost felt insulting. Not a hospital, not a lawsuit, not some life-shattering catastrophe, just the steady adult nightmare of a machine deciding it had reached retirement before you had. "How bad?" I asked. "Bad enough," he said. "Guy says it's done. Cracked heat exchanger. Translation. Replace it. Translation. Money." I closed my eyes for a second. This was it. The test. Part 6 had whispered about, not abstract, not philosophical. A bill with numbers on it. "You safe tonight?" I asked. "Yeah, we've got space heaters. It's just, we should handle it quick." "We, not you," I noticed. "How much?" Another pause. "About $11,000. I spent more than that last month without blinking, and suddenly it weighed as much as a planet." Dad rushed to fill the silence. "I'm not calling to ask you to pay for it," he said quickly. I needed to say it out loud to someone." I believed him. That's what made it harder. We talked logistics, warranties, install dates, how Mom was already wearing 3 sweaters and pretending she wasn't worried. Normal conversation, but underneath it, something else breathed. Choice. After we hung up, I stood in that cereal aisle way longer than necessary, because there are 2 kinds of help. The kind you offer, and the kind people accept, and they are not always the same thing. I drove to their house, didn't call ahead. If we were really rebuilding this family, I wanted to show up in real time. Mom opened the door, wrapped in a blanket like a burrito, trying to act casual. "Oh good," she said, surprised but pleased. Reinforcements. Dad was at the kitchen table with the quote in front of him. He looked embarrassed, not because I knew, because he couldn't protect me from knowing. I sat down, we reviewed it together like a committee. Efficiency ratings, financing options, the slow bleed of responsibility. Finally, I asked the question we were all orbiting, what's the plan? Dad leaned back. We'll put some on the card, he said. Shift some savings around, might push retirement a little, but we'll manage. I nodded. What, he had made a plan that did not include me? That mattered. I took a breath. Okay, I said, and then I broke my own heart a little. I'd like to cover it. Silence. Mum froze. Mid-blanket adjustment. Dad blinked. You don't have to, he said immediately. I know that's a lot of money. I know. He studied me. What's the catch? There it was. History. Double quotes. No catch, I said. I'm not buying influence. I'm not buying holidays. I'm not buying votes in future arguments. A weak smile from Mom. I'm offering relief, I continued, because I can, and because watching you stress about this when I don't have to feels wrong. Dad rubbed his jaw. Pride versus practicality. Ancient fight. I don't want to become dependent, he said quietly. You won't? I replied. One furnace isn't a lifestyle. Mom laughed at that. Tension cracked. He looked at the numbers. Again. Then at me. Then at the version of our relationship that had been forming, fragile and brave. Okay, he said, but it's a gift, not an expectation. Deal. We shook on it like business partners who loved each other. Conversation complete. Installation happened 3 days later. Warm air filled the house like forgiveness. Mom cried. Dad pretended he had allergies, and I thought that was the end of it. Lesson learned. Rule successful. Family leveled up. I was wrong. Because generosity echoes, and echoes travel. 2 nights later my sister called. Dad told me. She said gently. I waited. I'm glad you helped, she continued. They were really scared. Me too, I said, and I meant it. She hesitated and I felt the ground shift. Not manipulation, not entitlement, just the terrifying gravity of comparison. I keep wondering, she admitted, what happens next time something breaks somewhere else. Fair. Honest. Human. I chose my words carefully. Next time, I said, we talk again from scratch, no assumptions. She exhaled. Okay, but it wasn't relief. It was awareness, because now the family knew. 2 things could be true at once. I didn't owe them money, and I might help anyway. That space between those truths, that's where tension lives. That night I lay awake understanding something I hadn't before. Money doesn't just solve problems, it creates possibility, and possibility can feel like hope or like unfairness, depending on where you stand. I had wanted to be generous now. I had to learn how to be consistent because inconsistency breeds stories. And stories can rot love from the inside. But despite the fear, one fact remained. No one had demanded. No one had cornered. No one had tried to turn help into obligation. We were still choosing each other, even when it was complicated. And maybe that's what a healthy family looks like. Not perfect, not simple, but willing to stand in uncomfortable conversations without reaching for weapons. I stared at the ceiling and whispered into the dark, please let me do this right. Because more tests were coming. Bigger ones. Messier ones. The kind where everyone's definition of fair would be different. But for now, the house was warm. Dad could sleep. Mom could breathe. And I had given without disappearing. News travels fast in families, not through announcements, through tone, through the way someone says he helped. By the weekend, the story had evolved from I paid for the furnace into something softer and heavier. I was successful. I was generous. I was available. 3 ideas that, when placed together, start building expectations whether anyone means to or not. It started with Aunt Linda. She called Sunday afternoon. Cheerful in that overly bright way people use when they're nervous about their own intentions. I heard you saved the day, she said. I smiled even though she couldn't see it. I helped with a repair. I corrected gently, while she laughed. Still, your parents must feel so relieved. They are, I said. That's what matters. There was a pause. I felt it arrive like weather. I hate to even bring this up, she began, and I knew she absolutely did not hate bringing it up. She told me about her roof, how winter had been rough, how insurance was being difficult, how she was just trying to figure things out. She never actually asked, but the shape of the conversation leaned toward me the way plants lean toward sunlight. I listened. Boca, she wasn't evil. She was worried, and worry makes people reach. When she finished, I said the hardest sentence I'd practiced in my head all week. I'm really sorry you're dealing with that. I let it land, then I continued, but I can't become the solution to everyone's emergencies. Silence, not angry, just recalibrating. Oh, she said finally, of course, I understand. And I believed she did. Disappointed. But understanding. Those 2 things can live together. I hope it works out, I added. I really do. Thank you, she replied. Conversation over. No explosion, no drama, just a boundary, visible and real. When I hung up, I felt terrible and proud both at once, because here's the part nobody tells you about money and family. If you say yes to everyone, you lose yourself. If you say no to everyone, you lose them. So you spend your life walking a tightrope between love and self-protection, hoping the wind is gentle. That evening Dad called. Aunt Linda talked to your mom, he said. I groaned. Am I in trouble? He chuckled. No. She said you were kind. I blinked. Kind. She said you listened, he continued, and you were honest. Relief moved through me so fast I had to sit down. You did good, Dad added. 3 words, simple, massive, because for years, doing good had meant disappearing. This time it meant staying. I don't want you to feel like people are circling you, he went on. I don't, I said. And for the first time it was mostly true. They're learning, he said. So am I. We talked a little longer about normal things. Dinner, whether a TV show Mom liked, and then we said goodnight like families who expected to talk again tomorrow. Proper ending, no ghosts in it after the call. I sat in the quiet of my living room and realized something important. The line wasn't just for them, it was for me. A reminder that love given freely is beautiful, but love demanded becomes rent, and I refused to start charging or paying it. By the time I went to bed, the guilt had softened. In its place was something steadier. Respect. Mutual, growing real. The family could now see the line. They might step near it sometimes, they might even wish it were further away, but they knew it existed, and they knew I would protect it, which meant finally I could stay in the picture without fading out. More conversations were coming, bigger ones, the kind that would decide what we truly were to each other. But they would happen in daylight, not whispers, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of them. And catching up is exhausting. Kai knew eventually we would have to talk about it, not through comments, not through proud declarations online, but honestly face to face. We would have to stand in the space between who they thought I was and who I had become. That day was approaching. I could feel it gathering, like whether they were watching my success through screens, celebrating from afar, realizing piece by piece that the child who once accepted cancellation had built a life that could no longer be postponed. Soon admiration would not be enough. Soon they would want access, and I would have to decide what it cost. The invitation came on a quiet evening while I was answering emails. The message from Mom, simple, warm, almost careful. We would love for you to come home this weekend. Your father and sister will be here too. We thought maybe we could all spend time together. We miss you. I read it slowly, feeling the weight behind words that sounded gentle but carried years inside them. For a long time I had imagined this moment, the return, not as a visit, but as a reckoning, a chance to finally say the things that had lived in my throat since the day my celebration vanished. I was no longer afraid of the conversation. I was afraid of who it would make me. Still, I knew avoiding it would keep me tied to a history I had worked too hard to outgrow. So I said yes. The drive back felt different from move-in day. I was not a child being delivered into possibility. I was an adult carrying my own gravity. The house appeared the same, the paint, the porch, the windows, but I stepped out of the car knowing I would never again fit inside it the way I once had. Mom opened the door before I knocked. She hugged me tightly and I felt real love. Their familiar and complicated. Dad followed, his smile proud, uncertain. My sister waited behind them, older, somehow softer than I remembered. For a few minutes we performed reunion laughter, compliments, stories about traffic, anything to delay the truth. Sitting patiently at the table with us, dinner passed, kindly, almost tender, and I could see them trying. Each question directed at me carried attention. They wanted to understand my world. They wanted proof that they still belonged in it. After the plates were cleared, we remained seated, the air heavy but ready. Dad finally spoke, saying, "We are so proud of you. You know that, right?" I nodded. Mom reached for my hand and said, "We have been thinking a lot lately about everything, about the past, about how things happen." My sister looked down, twisting her fingers together. The moment had arrived. Took a breath, and for once, I did not make myself smaller. I told them I loved them. I told them I knew they never intended to hurt me, but intention did not erase impact. I said, "Growing up, I often felt like my happiness was negotiable, like it could be postponed. Whenever someone else needed the spotlight," I said, "when the party was cancelled, something inside me understood my place in the family more clearly than ever before." No one interrupted. I spoke about being called easy and how it trained me to hide my disappointment, how I learned to survive on being low maintenance instead of being valued. I admitted leaving for college felt less like adventure and more like rescue. Mom started crying quietly. Dad stared at the table. My sister whispered. I didn't know. I believed her, and I didn't at the same time. I told them I did not blame her. She had been a child to moving inside the system that rewarded her pain and overlooked mine, but I needed them to understand that I had built my independence not to punish them but to protect myself. The words filled the room like furniture finally placed where it belonged. For a while, nobody spoke. Then Dad said, "We failed you sometimes. We thought we were keeping peace, but really we were asking you to carry it for us." Mom squeezed my hand and apologized, not in the quick way people apologize to end discomfort, but in the slow, trembling way of someone seeing damage clearly. My sister began crying too, saying she was sorry she had taken up so much air. She said she wished she had noticed me more. Listening to them hurt and healed at the same time, because acknowledgement is powerful, but it cannot return years. It can only change what happens next. I told them I was not there for revenge. I was there for honesty. I needed them to meet the person I had become, not the version that kept everyone comfortable. They nodded. We talked for hours about small memories, large ones, misunderstandings, habits, the invisible math of attention. It was messy and exhausting and necessary. By the end, we were not fixed, but we were real. When it grew late, Mom asked if I would ever forgive them. I thought about it carefully. Forgive had already begun long ago. In every phone call I answered, every visit I accepted, every thank you I allowed them to give me without correcting the past. Forgiveness was not the hard part. Trust would take longer. I told her that, and she nodded as if she understood. The next morning, sunlight entered my old room, touching the walls that had watched me grow smaller and then leave. I packed my bag feeling lighter than I had in years, not because pain had disappeared, but because it finally had witnesses. The door, Mom hugged me. Dad promised to visit my sister, asked if we could talk more, just us sometime, and I said yes to all of it because I wanted a future with them, but one built on recognition, not a softness. I drove away. I realized something important. They had finally seen me, not because the internet forced them. Not because success made me impressive, but because I had spoken. The child who once accepted cancellation would have protected them from this discomfort. The adult I became understood that love sometimes requires letting people face what they would rather forget. My life waited for me back at school, bright, demanding mine. I carried my family with me, not as a burden now, but as unfinished work, something we would keep learning if we were brave enough. In the end, they had not lost me, they had met me, and this time I had not made myself easy. Have you ever been the easy child in your family, the one expected to sacrifice while everyone else came first? And what finally made you choose yourself? If this story hit close to home, make sure to like this video, subscribe for more real family drama and powerful journeys. Share this with someone who needs to remember their feelings matter too, and comment below what you would have done in this situation.